AITA for yelling at my pregnant sister-in-law and telling my husband if he should choose me or her. I realize the headline sounds incorrect, but please hear me out. I'm typing this all up while my husband's entire family sits downstairs. So, I am a 29-year-old woman who has been married to her spouse for 8 years. I had my third miscarriage, at 31 weeks, around 2 months ago. I won't talk about it since it makes me depressed, but you should remember this. My sister-in-law, 20, arrived at our door about 4 months ago, crying, telling us she was pregnant and that her partner didn't want anything to do with it, that she had nowhere to go. My husband and I openly welcomed her into our home. For the first few weeks, it was really difficult for her. I sat with her for hours, holding her when she wept, binge-watching our favorite shows, and eating so much ice cream that we literally passed out. I thought it was a great way for us to bond. This is when things start to go wrong. I take pride in keeping my house neat and clean. However, my sister-in-law did not. She would leave her clothing all over the home, her dirty dishes everywhere, and even her adult toys on our living room table. When I tried to talk to her directly before talking to my husband, she burst into tears and urged me to tidy up. I held her and told her everything was fine, but this was a clear barrier for me. She assured me it would not happen again. But it only got worse when she informed me I was supposed to do her laundry, dishes, and clean her room every day because she was pregnant. Well, I understand how difficult it is to be pregnant. I simply couldn't handle feeling like a maid in my own home. Disclaimer, I purchased this house, not my husband. It was all me. Not to mention the recent loss of my child. So I told my spouse, and what he said startled me. His precise comments were, "Honey, she's going through a lot right now. We really should be helping her out. Furthermore, caring for someone who is pregnant may help you feel better." I was furious to say the least. Help me feel better? Is she going through a lot? Do we need to help her? Wasn't letting her stay with us enough? While I don't wish to diminish her sorrow, my husband and I were also dealing with our own issues. Anyway, we carried on, and I did my best to balance work and household tasks. My husband works from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., so he isn't there to help much. I work full-time from home, so it's been really stressful, and if I attempt to ask my sister-in-law for help, she always makes an excuse. Even if she is just watching television. The one thing that drove me over the line was going out to buy my favorite cuisine since my miscarriage. I signed my name on it and specifically requested my sister-in-law not to consume it. So I went to my fridge to fetch it, and you won't believe what happened. She freaking ate it. Now you might think, it's just food. I buy all the groceries and pay all the bills. I don't mind people eating some of my food, but the one thing I prefer not to be touched is touched. I informed my husband, and he stuck it in my face that she is pregnant, that I should be less selfish, and that life is about making sacrifices. I was so outraged that I told him he and she reminded me of the nasty roommates people talk about on Reddit. He did not take it well, lol. Which brings us to my title. My sister-in-law organized a strange baby shower celebration at my place. Personally, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to be at home when this happened. I was very hurt that she wouldn't talk to me knowing everything that had happened, and that she would just bring random strangers into someone else's home without asking. My spouse persuaded me to go, telling me that it would have a long-term impact on my and her relationship. So I informed him I was going. About halfway through the party, my husband and SIL declared that they wanted to show everyone the nursery. I was bewildered. Nursery? Was she staying that long? Which room did she make into a nursery? They told everyone to go upstairs, and that's when it hit me. They were discussing MY nursery, for the baby I had just lost. When I watched everyone in my baby's nursery complimenting her on how well they had put it up, I was overcome with emotion. My setup. My body failed to deliver my baby. I've just lost it. I began sobbing, and that sadness quickly transformed into hatred. I began ranting at my sister-in-law, telling her she was the worst human for putting me through everything she has over the past few months, making me feel like I was a maid or an item for her benefit. Through choking tears, I glanced to my husband, whose jaw was on the floor. I turned to see his entire family staring at me. I lost it again. I yelled at my sister-in-law, asking her, how dare she use my nursery for my baby? How dare she think she has the right? What she told me made me fall on my knees, sobbing. It's not my fault you couldn't produce a child. Why let this go to waste? You're so selfish. My husband attempted to take me up off the floor, but I yelled again, standing on my knees, which were now shaking. I told him. Pick. He had a dumbfounded expression on his face. I yelled again, pick me or her. He couldn't come up with anything to say. I just glanced at him, and I pushed through the gathering of family members to type this down. Even if no one sees it, it has helped me express my emotions. Now is the time to question if I am the asshole. Update. Sorry for any mistakes or misspelled words. I'm not sure whether this is the right way to post an update, but perhaps everyone will see it. First, I'd like to address a few remarks. You can skip this section if you don't care, lol. I know I had a stillbirth. The only reason I mention miscarriage is because my obstetrician told me that was what was happening. Second, some people have claimed that this narrative is fabricated because of how I characterized the debate, falling to my knees, pure treachery. Yes, I realized I spelled it incorrectly, but I can assure you that it is not. I can't make anyone believe me, but this is my life, so you can decide whether it's real or not. Here's the much-anticipated update. Buckle up, it's going to be long. After publishing my experience on Reddit, I sat on my bed, wiping away my tears and telling myself I would not tolerate this disrespect. I walked downstairs, shutting my nursery door along the way, and was greeted by everyone comforting my sister-in-law. I politely requested that everyone but my sister-in-law and husband leave my residence. After all the horrible glances and shame, it was only my husband, sister-in-law, and I. They sat on the couch and said nothing. I sat with them. The stillness felt endless. Neither of us had anything to say, so I knew I'd have to start the conversation. I looked at my spouse and asked, "Have you decided?" He glanced at me, fascinated. I requested again, this time with a forceful tone. He ended up mumbling some type of insult, which I couldn't make out. Something bitchy. I stepped up and told them both to leave. They then wanted to chat. They're telling me it's all a misunderstanding, that they're sorry, and so on. I took a backpack from my shoe closet and told them to load their shit. My sister-in-law told me I couldn't just make her leave, and that I was a terrible person. I laughed in her face, telling her that this was my house and I could do whatever I wanted. My spouse stood next to me, telling her it was only for a short time. I turned to him and said, "You, too, get out." He became enraged and informed me that we were a married couple, and that this is not how marriage works. I informed him that marriage is a relationship in which two people support one another and do not treat their wife poorly. They both left after numerous insults to me. Oh, but it's not over. This morning, as I was preparing for a Zoom meeting with a few other coworkers, my spouse arrived. I allowed him in, asking him to gather whatever he needed and leave since I had to work. He began apologizing and assuring me he wanted to make things right. I told him I just needed time away from him. Then he flung in my face, "Well, it's not my fault you lost our children. Perhaps this would never have happened." My sister was correct. You are selfish. I have never made my husband feel as if he cannot grieve alongside me over this, nor have I made him feel less than because of his pain. I turned around and whacked his face. I never condone violence and am horrified that I would ever do so to another human being, but I couldn't deal with this. He took a step back and tossed all of my cosmetics on the floor, which I understand, but then he began damaging all of my bathroom decor. I yelled, asked him to stop, and apologized, but he kept going. Even going so far as to punch a hole in the restroom wall. It was as if I was witnessing all of his bottled-up feelings from our children's deaths emerge. But he went too far when he tried to grab me and yelled in my face, so I shoved him off and told him to get out. He came out of the bathroom, and I saw him destroy a couple more things as he left. I had a panic attack the second he departed, from the mess he made to the way he masked his anguish. I called my mother and told her everything that had happened. I don't talk to my family much because of a past trauma with them. She informed me that she was on her way. I broke down as soon as she arrived, and she hugged me. Then she rose up and started photographing everything he broke. When I asked her what she was doing, she turned to me and stated, "We're suing this POS." I didn't even protest because my husband's actions had upset me so much. My mom packed my computer, and I grabbed a few outfits. My mother and I traveled to a motel, and she insisted on staying with me. While I finished up work, she contacted a locksmith and my attorney. I will divorce him as well. So, here it is, the much-anticipated update. I feel bad for giving up on my spouse and our 8-year marriage, but it's time for a divorce. I cannot live like this, and neither can my husband. I wish I could say we went on, forgiven each other, and I got to watch my sister-in-law have her kid. However, this is not reality. Ada for refusing to consider ending our divorce after my ex revealed that her psychic buddy lied about me having an affair. I met my wife, Rona, in college. I made the clearly stupid assumption that because she was in post-secondary education, she had some common sense. We began dating during our senior year and decided to return to her hometown following graduation after looking for work. We got an apartment and lived together for 2 years before we married. Everything is going okay so far. During our wedding, I encountered an old acquaintance of hers, Anna. She volunteered to read my palm because she was part gypsy. Weird. I work in construction and know a few folks from that tribe, who call themselves Roma. Whatever. Anna only visits town once in a while. She lives in New York City and does not have time to visit because her life is so fascinating there. She creates costumes for plays and cosplayers. So we'll see her maybe 4 times in the next 2 years. Her previous visit was on Labor Day of last year. And that's when things turned weird. Rona suddenly exhibits unusual behavior. She starts checking in with me at work. Come by when I'm working late. I'm asking to use my phone because hers is almost out of juice. That kind of thing. She finally comes forward and accuses me of having an affair. I believed she was joking, so I laughed and said that I am not. This sets her off like a Roman candle. Because Anna assured her I'd laugh it off when Rona demanded the truth. I laughed because it was so silly. I barely had time for a connection with my wife or my career. I am at home all weekend. When I go golfing, her brother is usually either in my foursome or at the club. Most importantly, I love my wife. I would not do anything to damage her. Nonetheless, she believes Anna, the psychic seamstress, over me. She begs me to leave our flat. I decline since I have nowhere else to go. So she leaves and returns to her parents. They also think she's crazy. I spent the following 3 months working and convincing her that I am not cheating and that I want her to return home. I am not invited to Thanksgiving because it would be awkward. I didn't even stay around for Christmas. I went home to visit my relatives. They had been watching all this foolishness without commenting until then. They had an intervention over Christmas. They claimed my wife was experiencing a reality break and would not be able to recover. My father advised me to shake my head, something he only does when I'm being monumentally foolish. When I returned, I went to a lawyer to begin my divorce. That was in January. Finally, around the beginning of April, Rona contacts me to discuss. I propose that we converse through lawyers. She begins to cry, and I promise to see her in public if she will let me film our talk and submit a copy to my lawyer. She eventually consented. It turns that she and her parents hired a private detective to investigate my affair. 6 months and a big cost later, there's no evidence of an affair. She finally trusts me and wants to return home. I inform her that our lease expires in July and that I have already found a job in Denver close to my family. She says she'll come with me. I respectfully declined. I explained that we simply weren't a good match. The truth is that I do not want my children to share DNA with this dingbat. Anyway, I'm pushing forward with my divorce. I am devastated that she chose her friend's psychic vibrator over mine. Her family has approached me multiple times. Her father previously offered to provide us with a 25% down payment on a house if I agreed to attend marriage counseling rather than simply leaving. I graciously declined. I cannot be purchased. Rona is now depressed, but I don't see how I can ever trust her again. She is young enough to marry again and ruin another guy's life. AITA for breaking my deathbed promise to my wife to look after her Down syndrome daughter. My late wife's entire life revolved around her 30-year-old daughter, who has Down syndrome and has never and will never be able to live independently. She will never be able to exercise true emotional impulse control. And, before you all jump on the evil stepdad who doesn't care to understand train of thought, I'd like to point out that I've been in her life since she was 5. And she spent years dreading the day when she would be physically developed enough to be a legitimate threat with punches, scratches, and throwing things. When that happened, all of my wife's friends stopped coming to our house. One of them even stated that her uncle works with vicious dogs for a living, and she feels safer around his workplace than at our house. I've had to go to the doctor several times because I was sitting in the same room as my stepdaughter and she tried to pound my head in, throw a heavy object at me, or choke me after I fell asleep. My late wife was the only person who could consistently calm her down. When we began using caregivers for my stepdaughter after my wife's diagnosis, they would ask me if I could advise them on a better way to explain things to my stepdaughter when she was acting out. Even those who were used to explaining things to people who didn't understand them were struggling and seeking advice. When my late wife was diagnosed, the first word she said was my stepdaughter's name. She cried every day, wondering what would become of her. In her desperation, she pressed the doctor for chemotherapy, even though it no longer made sense. She turned to alternative medicine, despite the fact that it made her feel worse. She stated that she would have stopped all treatment if she had only left behind an employable, functioning 30-year-old. On her deathbed, she made me promise not to let her end up in a state care facility. I promised her because I couldn't bear not to. However, my stepdaughter remains the same 2 months later, after my grief fog has cleared. She doesn't understand her mother's death, she just knows she's gone and is angry with me for it. Saying she'll be fine, so bring her back. Caregivers are pricey. I don't earn much. I didn't resent my wife's medical expenses, but I do resent my stepdaughter. My own grown children refuse to visit when she is present. If I hadn't made the deathbed promise, the decision would have been simple. And finally, I decided that I needed to put her in a state-run facility, because even though my wife had left me everything, I couldn't afford anything better. My family now refers to me as the evil stepdad, a mother's worst nightmare. Ada, for shutting off my wife after she said that having love with me did nothing for her. For reference, M56 and F47 have been together for 26 years and married for more than 20 years. 1 child. We always make the most of our weekends together, and yesterday was no different. We spent the day shopping and eating, then caught up with pals for a few drinks before returning home. When the conversation turned to partnerships and how to keep the spark alive, one of the younger women asked my wife how she kept love enjoyable after being with someone for so long. "I'm not sure. Having intercourse with me has done nothing for me since our child, 18, was born." There was an unpleasant stillness, and people began finding excuses for leaving. While traveling home, mostly in silence, I asked her whether she thought that was an appropriate comment and if she wanted to apologize. As usual, she doubled down and accused me of being too sensitive. Since then, there has been no communication. Told, am I a jerk for being irritated because my wife told strangers that having an affair with me did nothing for her? She has stated that penetration means nothing to her because she has been unable to climax in that manner since childbirth, but this was not what she expressed in public. I knew there was a problem and purchased the equipment/balls to assist her tighten up, but they were never used. Love would consist primarily of foreplay, oral interaction, and, on sometimes, toy play. This would give her 3 or 4 orgasms prior to penetration. I believed she enjoyed the proximity. I don't guilt her into bed. After we had our child, I waited 10 months before we resumed physical intimacy. I'm not going to insult her to make myself feel better. 2 wrongs make things a lot worse. She has tried to blame the comment on menopause. She is in perimenopause, and the few drinks she had, but I don't believe it. That is an excuse, not an apology. I'm not your typical Scotsman, no deep-fried Mars bars for me. I work a physical job and run 5K every other day. I had a 32-inch waist when we married, and I'm now a 34. To be honest, I feel shocked, ashamed, embarrassed, and emasculated. I cannot see ever being intimate with her again. Update 2. We are 4 weeks into this. I requested an apology, and "I'm sorry what I said offended you" is not an apology. The in-law mafia has closed ranks and blamed me. She did not tell the complete tale. She tried to initiate love, she wanted oral, and felt it would be fine. It didn't happen. I spend more time at work and running than I do at home. She has a chest infection, and I am dealing with it. Ada for preparing a microscope slide of my husband's sperm. I think this is dumb, but my hubby is unhappy with me, so whatever. I went to take a shower this morning and saw that my husband had not so gracefully spun his seat on our glass shower door and had not cleaned it up. I approached him and asked that he clean it up in the future and perhaps reconsider jerking it in our communal shower if he can't clean up after himself well. I do not want my shower to be full of crusty old jizz. He argued with me that it was simply shampoo and that I was acting crazy. The fact that he continued maintaining it was shampoo when I knew it wasn't irritated me, so I grabbed a Q-tip, a microscope slide, and a glass covering to create a wet-mounted slide. If you're wondering why I have those, it's because I took a microbiology course in college years ago and saved everything. I inspected his slide and showed it to him. It was clearly sperm. We had a major fight, and he got upset at me and said I can never let anything go. I told him we wouldn't be in this situation if he just cleaned up after himself, and I urged him to quit claiming I'm wrong when I know I'm right. We have frequent disagreements in which he tells me I'm wrong when I know I'm correct and becomes enraged when I prove my point. For example, he believes that our dog's vet is open on Sundays, despite the fact that it is closed, etc. I work as a private investigator. It is in my nature to want to know what is true and what is not. He knew this before we married. Eta? Edit, yes, I am aware that I am psycho. No, my husband is not a poor emotionally repressed man venting his frustration on the shower door. I do him almost every day. Crazy is good in bed. No, I'm not sure why he doesn't just say sorry for jizzing on the shower door. I'll go clean up my swimmers. No, we are not getting divorced. Say whatever you want, I enjoy my marriage and life. I'm going to go fingerprint my box of fruit snacks to check if he ate any. AITA for becoming upset at my mother-in-law and husband for eating all of the food before I did. My mother-in-law has been showing up whenever she wants since I gave birth 4 months ago, so I now have 4 children in all, and she always helps herself to whatever she wants when she comes. She's never offered to help me or the baby in any manner. She's basically just come to see her son. For example, around 3 weeks ago I brewed a modest pot of coffee, enough for 2 glasses. I went to nurse the baby while waiting, and at some point, my mother-in-law appears and lets herself in. When I came out, she had finished the entire pot. I didn't have any coffee grounds left. Or she ate my leftovers right out of the fridge several times. And she always says, "Thanks for the food/coffee." As if I offered it to her when I certainly did not, because all she does is make my life miserable. I told my husband to speak with her about it, and he said he did, but I don't believe so. I spoke up the last time she was here, 3 weeks ago, and told her she needed to stop helping herself since she was eating and drinking food that I desired and her made. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and stopped coming around for a while. So, today I baked 4 handmade pizzas. I told the kids to help themselves to dinner and that I needed to go get the baby down for a little nap and would be right back. It took me around 45 minutes because the baby was cranky, she just received vaccinations. When I returned, the entire pizza had been consumed, and my mother-in-law and husband were chowing down. I just said, "Are you kidding me right now?" My husband questioned what was going on, and I replied, "You couldn't have even left me an ugly slice?" "Sure, let's feed the vile neighborhood before I can eat." "That is fantastic of you guys. Thanks." And begin to walk off. My oldest kid, 13, comes in and says, "Mom, I left you a plate." "I put it right on the counter," he says, and walks over to grab it, only to find that it is also gone. My grandmother stated I thought it was leftover from dinner. So my kid is apologizing to me despite the fact that he done nothing wrong, while my mother-in-law and husband stand there? They're literally not saying anything. So I looked at them and said, "You both need to leave right now." My husband then decides to speak, saying that it was an honest mistake and that no one meant any harm and that I was making a mountain out of a molehill, which honestly just pissed me off more, so I snapped again and said, "Yeah, except every time your awful mother comes here, I end up going without because she eats or drinks my portion of everything." But, okay, let's defend someone snatching food from my mouth, shall we? His mother runs out of the home, and my husband stares at me as if I'm nuts, so I yell, "Quick, chase her and leave." My spouse thinks I'm kicking mental and that everything could have been fixed if I had acted like an adult. He will not return home. But, at this point, I don't even want him to return home because it means his mother will stay away. Ada for refusing to let my cousin into my home after he stole $2,000 worth of games from me when he was a teenager. I let my 16-year-old cousin into my home 10 years ago. Every video game he handled that day was missing the following day. He removed the discs from their casings, and who knows what happened to them after that. Some of these games were rare and out of print. When my mother discovered that I had informed his father, my uncle, about this, she called him and told him that because I was an Aspie, I had no idea my cousin had stolen the games from me. My cousin got away with stealing from me because of this. My mother then stated she knew she had lied to my uncle because she was concerned that my cousin's mental health would suffer as a result of being grounded all summer. Now I have a house, and I refuse to let my relative in until he apologizes for stealing from me. My family claims I'm being childish since he stole from me when he was a child, but I believe he learned it was safe to steal from me thanks to my mother's intervention. How do I address this? AITA for digging in my heels about intimacy in a prenup? I can't believe I'm asking this, but my boyfriend has grown so upset that I'm feeling a bit crazy. He and I are both 34 years old, and he had a terrible marriage before me that ended in a dead bedroom, and he is determined never to return to that existence. I understand, and I think that was a bad experience for him. So now he wants a prenup that explicitly states that we shall have sleep X number of times per week or I will receive nothing in the divorce. I had already agreed to a 50-50th split of marital assets, and we kept what we brought into the marriage. That's not enough for him. He wants me to prove that I will continue having love with him in the future. I tell him that I cannot prove the future, and that putting something in writing does not prove that. Now he argues I must have a guilty conscience if I refuse to sign these agreements, because if I'm so sure it won't happen, what's the problem? However, it makes me feel like a sick slave rather than a cherished wife or partner.